Out in the desert, I became a better athlete than I ever was before. It was not uncommon for me to run 250 miles a week. 250 miles a week is 1,000 miles a month. 12 months, that's 12,000 miles right there. When I started to lose my eyesight, I kept pushing and pushing. And after a couple of years, I honed myself to run across Death Valley. My purpose was to start at Badwater and go the roughly 150 miles to the summit of Mount Whitney. It had never been done before. My very dear friend, David and I started training together. But one of the things David didn't do was the heat training. Going down to Death Valley the first time in 1974, we started at 4 o'clock in the morning. Dave came down with heat stroke after about 18 miles. If you get heat stroke, the clock is ticking. At Furnace Creek, we put David in the bathtub. I put over 100 pounds of ice on him. And there were people there, and they said they'd take care of him. So then I took off and started running. The only thing I could think of was that my good friend was dying. His temperature, core temperature, was over 104. So I stopped. It took him over a year before he recovered. That's how close he was to dying. And that's the reason why I didn't make it the first time. The second time I went down there, I showed Death Valley absolutely no respect whatsoever. I figured I'm going to go back and kill it. I ran a mile under 6 minutes in that attempt. I was charging instead of taking it easy. And after 40, 50 miles, I learned real fast who was the boss. You don't charge Death Valley. You treat Death Valley the same way you do when you're making a meringue. If you go too fast, the whole thing will collapse. It's not so hard physically. What it's really hard is mentally to slow down. It had never been done before. It wasn't important how fast I did it.
Bristlecone pines live in a pretty high altitude near Death Valley. The bristlecone pines survive where other things wouldn't because they are slowing down to a painstakingly slow growth rate. The bristlecone pines are so beautiful because you really can see their struggle is sort of inherent in their form. So it's almost like you can watch their movement over time and understand that they really want to live. Like there's a sense of doing whatever it takes to survive in a pretty harsh environment. It actually wasn't until the 60s that people knew that they were that old. A grad student had lost his coring bit in the middle of a tree, and the Forest Service said, well, just go ahead and cut it down. There's plenty of them. And it turned out he cut down what ended up being the oldest known tree in the world at the time. That was the Prometheus tree. The oldest bristlecone pines are over 5,000 years old. The oldest unitary organisms on the planet. It's really interesting to think about what was going on in history at that time. The invention of the wheel and cuneiform, the first written language. So it really actually demarcates the beginning of human history. I had been working on a lot of landscape work that was about the relationship between humanity and nature. And I got an invitation to visit some friends in Japan. I took the advice that several people had given to me, which was, if you're interested in nature, you should go visit the 7,000-year-old tree. And it's on this remote island called Yakushima. And I just bought a new camera. It was a medium format film camera. And I photographed it. But I had no idea when I started that it would be a 10-year endeavor, photographing the oldest living things, looking for things that were continuously living for 2,000 years and longer. 2,000 being, why is it 2018 right now? Like, isn't it, 4,500,000,000 2018? Like, really trying to create this framework for understanding human timekeeping. So initially I thought, I'll find somebody who's going to partner with me, an evolutionary biologist. And he said, well, look at what you're doing. It's really broad. This is not something that one scientist would ever claim expertise at. That was the first moment when I realized I would have to be the expert. It was thrilling to learn that there were so many organisms that have been alive for 2,000 years and longer. I had no idea. The honey mushroom is a 2,400-year-old humongous fungus that lives almost entirely underground. That is actually the largest organism in the world. Its unique footprint, if you will, is that it will kill trees in this circular pattern. And so that's known as armillaria death rings. And it's quite clever because it doesn't kill the trees until after they've reached reproductive age. So thereby it's ensuring that it will continue to have a food supply. There's an 80,000-year-old clonal colony of aspen trees in Utah. It's known as Pando. And this is fascinating because what looks like a forest is essentially one tree, 106 acres in size. And what I mean by that is that it's this giant interconnected root system, and each tree is actually a stem coming up from that system. This whole system communicates with all parts of itself. So, if one section needs water, an area that has more water can send it through the root system to the place that needs it, or likewise nutrients or warning signs. I was surprised to learn that there were any animals that were over 2,000 years old, and it turns out there's several. In Antarctica, there's the volcano sponge, some of which are thought to be up to 15,000 years old. The one that I got to photograph, however, I had to learn to scuba dive for that, around 60 feet deep. It actually took my breath away seeing this just enormous creature. It almost looked like some lost meteorite at the bottom of the sea. What are the things that connect these organisms that seem so different? I came to understand that fast and furious is not the way to live and grow. Map lichens in Greenland grow 1 centimeter every 100 years. The continents are actually drifting away from each other faster than these lichens are growing. A number of the oldest living things thrive in a pretty harsh environment. Not in spite of this harsh environment they live in, but because of it. And the Atakama Desert is really one of my favorites. It has seen almost no rainfall in all of recorded history. I drove from the coast farther and farther up this, tremendous elevation, and it just gets drier and drier and more desolate. And truly, you could be on another planet. I was there in search of the Ureta plants. They look like moss over rocks, but they're actually shrubs. So they're made up of thousands of these really tightly compressed branches. And they're so dense you could actually sit or stand on top of them. But at that altitude, you're likely to fall over from dizziness, so I don't recommend it. And who knows what else exists? We've really only scratched the surface of understanding what's on our own planet, let alone looking out to the rest of the universe.
We are all living in a base camp here in the middle of the desert, the driest desert of the world. This is the weather that astronomers like. So we see back in time, where no visible light is emitted.
Imagine light that began traveling and coming towards us from 8 billion light years away. Through empty space, this light travels unimpeded by anything, untouched, and then it hits Earth, and there's this very thin layer of Earth's atmosphere which can completely destroy that light. This layer is the reason why we can't look further and further into the universe, further and further back in time. One of the ways in which we can do that on Earth is to go up to the Atakama Desert in the Chilean Andes, where you're above most of the dense layers of Earth's atmosphere. And to me, it's really amazing that these ancient lands have been chosen as the site to look nearly to the beginning of time, when the first stars were being born. The VLT is made of 4 telescopes. The largest mirrors ever made from a monolithic piece of glass. And the surface had to be so precise. Imagine grinding a city like Paris down so that the only bumps left are about 1 millimeter high. That's the kind of precision that they needed for the kind of astronomy that we need to do now. These telescopes have become so sensitive, and the kind of things that we are studying have become so faint that astronomers are essentially in search of very, very special land that is completely radio quiet, which means no interference from television towers, mobile phones, transmission from airplanes, radios, urban centers. And that's what set me on journeys to these very extreme locations all over the Earth. These amazing places, which in themselves are poetic, where there was extreme physics being done. And also to share this sense that I have of what physics can do to us as human beings, not in terms of the knowledge, just simply in terms of how it makes us feel. And I wanted a way of exploring that feeling, a certain comprehension of an infinity, how immense everything is, that we are part of it and probably a very tiny dot in this vast scheme of things. The Hanle Observatory lies in one of the remotest regions of India. One of the remotest regions in the Indian Himalayas. There are almost no people there. It's quite an impressive, remote, cold, beautiful place. When I was standing on top of Mount Saraswati, which is the hill on which the telescope has been built, looking across the valley floor, perched really precariously at the other end of the valley, was this 400-year-old Buddhist monastery. The thing that became clear there, looking at the monastery from the telescope, was that both monks and cosmologists need silence. It's because of this silence that we are able to look deeper into the cosmos and further back in time. We need to preserve these places on Earth, because if we don't, then we'll end up on a planet that is so noisy, from television towers, mobile phones, or light pollution, which is a kind of noise, that we will be stranded in this cosmos without an ability to look outwards, to understand our very beginnings, and maybe understand where we are headed.
We live in a very busy world that doesn't foster silence. My childhood backyard was an ancient coral reef, many, many millennia back. It's like a cathedral, a place of great beauty and silence. It's easier to capture the evidence of some of the old passages of time here through the fossilized crustaceans of the mountains, through the pictographs that remain on those rocks, highly polished ancient mammoth rubbings, known trails from early settlers. So there's this beautiful echo of what's passed through, and I like to think about the people that came way before my own passing through, that their echoes are still here as well. I've been a founding member of Paul's Out of Eden Walk. He conceived of the idea while he was walking across this landscape.
I got this idea on this ranch in West Texas where I was doing a little help to local vaqueros, local cowboys. In the mid to late 90s, the genetic revolution was just taking off in a big way, and scientists were able to start extracting very useful information about ancient migrations, which you can trace through our DNA. I thought, what if I retraced the route of the first human beings who walked out of Africa to recreate the first primordial walk that we made across the world. The first discovery of the world by the first Homo sapiens, the first exploration of the Earth back in the Stone Age. I drew out the map of the intended global trail, about 20,000 plus miles on foot from Ethiopia to the tip of South America, Tierra del Fuego, which scientists tell us is the last virgin beach that our ancestors reached about 7,000 years ago.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been a foreign correspondent for the past 15 years. Foreign correspondents normally cover stories as they happen. They fly to story A and they fly to story B. What this project hopes to do is connect the spaces in between. And the argument there is that There are hidden links between major stories of our day that never get covered because we simply don't slow down enough to see them.
Paul's walk comes at a time when journalism is pressed on all sides by short attention span because of the immediacy of the digital age and the internet.
We're still carrying around a Pleistocene brain that absorbs information and processes the world at the pace of walking at 3 miles an hour.
Do you remember what Linda's reaction was?
Over a cup of coffee, maybe not even looking up from a newspaper or a book and just saying, so you're gonna walk around the world. All right, that sounds good. Again, she knows me. When I was 14, I walked across the Sierra Nevadas alone. Later, across Papua New Guinea and through Alaska, just living off a rifle.
He had walked from the border of Arizona to Mexico City, retracing the footsteps of an early Victorian explorer. Took a pack mule, and that took something like 9 months.
So then it was not too big of a leap to jump into a dugout canoe, a pirogue, to float down the Congo River for weeks to tell the story of the Congo Civil War. Or to walk away from a broken down Russian Jeep in Afghanistan and walk and ride horses over the Hindu Kush through hip-deep snow to get to the front lines of the Afghan war. I think whether we realize it or not, we're all on some form of pilgrimage, and that includes commuting to work, these micro-migrations. Even those are a form of pilgrimage. And it's our task maybe to find the meaning under them.
Being fearless is important for anyone that's trying to do something of the unknown. So I started to extend my training, acclimating my body to temperatures. For example, I rode a stationary bicycle in the sauna. The air temperature was 165 for 10 hours. I made sure that my skin did not touch the bike because it had been like a soldering iron. I would have scored myself. I didn't know I had this capacity. I did not know. 10 hours is a long time, but it's not 2, it's not 3 days. I wonder how much I can take. All the pain that I inflicted to find out about myself. Each step pushing the boundaries further and further. It took me 4 years, 15,000 miles. Then I started thinking, maybe I can run Death Valley. I headed north across the Panama Desert. The temperature was climbing and climbing. And I lost visual contact with the surrounding mountains. I have glaucoma. I can only see so much. I knew where the sun was supposed to be. Following the sun, I repositioned myself. Focused on it, I almost became hypnotized to it. I had to pay attention to my footing. I was by myself. My life depended on it.
Before setting out, in December of 2012, I went down to the finish line to meet the last native speaker of her indigenous language in that part of the world. So I spent a day with her at her cabin next to the Beagle Channel in Chile. This is just across the channel from Argentina, listening to her talk, and she would walk around and say, a canoe is this, and a rock is this, and the river is this. Recording this language is a form of gathering a precious stone at this point in time where a language is about to wink out, to carry with me across the world. To remind myself partly why I'm doing this. Because this project is rooted in the bedrock of history. And in that sense, it's also an act of remembering. And I just wanted to remember her as I walk towards her. I don't know if she'll still be there. I don't know. When I get there, she was quite old.
I had first photographed the 3,500-year-old Bald Cypress tree just outside of Orlando in 2007, I believe. A few years ago, some kids snuck in to do drugs inside the tree, and they actually set it on fire from the inside out. They then posted about it on Facebook and got caught, thankfully. But it was actually on fire for over a week before anyone knew. It was impossible to save. There it was, smoldering and dead. It really changed my perspective about everything that I was doing. It was a very painful reminder that just because something is incredibly old does not mean that it's immortal. In South Africa, a researcher I was speaking with introduced me to something that are collectively known as the underground forests. That area is very prone to fire, and what these trees did was basically migrate the bulk of their structures underground. And that way, when the fires inevitably come through, it just singes the top of the leaves off, which they can easily reproduce. And so I visited one that was around 13,000 years old. That's been around since mastodons and saber-toothed tigers when humans started farming. However, a few years later, I was informed that it had been destroyed when they decided to change the traffic patterns outside of the garden and paved right over it. It hit another note of the chord of what it means to be looking at time. The whole point of the project really was to create a relationship with timescales that are far removed from our normal human experience. And by doing so, to create a relationship with that time that's personal. When you see something that's alive now, that you can have an interaction with and has experienced 80,000 years of the world's history leading up to this moment that you meet it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the click of the shutter of a camera, so 60th of a second. And then somewhere in between those two, we somehow then all come together to share this moment. And to me, that's a way to start looking at time with a different perspective. Even though we are part of this giant continuum, it's actually a reminder to look at the small moments that make up the fabric of the time that we all spend here.
One of the places where some of the oldest Homo sapiens fossils have been found is the Rift Valley of Ethiopia. Bones about 156,000 years old. So I chose that as my starting line back in January of 2013 and walked away from that boneyard up the Rift Valley of Africa.
The Afar region where Paul started requires every bit of forethought and planning to survive. I'm grateful that I was able to join Paul, seeing him take the first few steps. As we continue to know each other, our paths have, they converge and diverge. He has been trying to understand the world and who we are through the soles of his feet. The antidote to instant news and abbreviated viewpoint. In my case, my path has to move through a level of abstraction to pursue those questions. For a period of time, we knew each other in the template of a traditional marriage. Though our practices are vastly different, what we share is appreciation for slowing down and seeing the invisible. But I suppose one of the more harrowing moments for me was when Paul was abducted along the Sudan-Chad border in 2006, and he went missing. There's always the element of risk because Paul does not shy away from challenging stories. So you wonder, are you going to see this person again as they walk off into the Afar Desert? We were moving in opposite directions now.
I saw horrible things about how we treat each other as human beings in my career as a war reporter. But walking has given me hope about our generally messed up species. Walking creates bonds. You get to know people. You talk about your life with each other. It's a bridge to that person's mind and heart, to their cosmos. On this journey, though, across continents, I hoped that things were going to be okay. It was a physically demanding starting line to the journey. The temperatures were extreme. The very first days of the journey were defined by this harsh reality of walking through a drying landscape where pastoral groups were fighting each other over shrinking pasture lands and drying water holes. So it became the war story almost immediately. And they were in fact killing each other. So we have actually walked through the Rift Valley along a very strange snaking route that if you took a satellite picture would seem nonsensical because there's no barrier. But they were following these invisible edges of conflict zones that most people couldn't see, that were invisible to the eye, but were as real as any trench works, on the front lines of any war. And I remember we had to kind of do a silent camp one night without fire so as not to be spotted to get through a danger zone before anybody noticed us. Climate change, it's a very difficult thing to convey to people because it appears to be moving so slowly. It's an incremental calamity. But when you're walking, you have no choice but to experience it through your own body in ways that reading about it never will, or looking at equations never will, or hearing politicians lie about it never will. And sure enough, after crossing the Djibouti border, we stumbled across men, women, and children who didn't make it.
A couple days ago, we found the bodies of 7 migrants in the desert. They died of thirst trying to reach Saudi Arabia, and they were just one ridgeline away from reaching the Red Sea, their watery finish line to get out of the desert. It's made my own journey seem frivolous. I've been on foot now for 40 some days. One day at a time.
So I'll just ask the question again.
Ok, on va juste reposer la question.
Abdul Nasser, it took you 1 week to walk here. Is the journey worth it, the danger of the journey worth going to Saudi Arabia when people are dying?
I was stuck in the port of Djibouti for 6 weeks because I couldn't convince a commercial cargo ship to take on a passenger with the risk of being attacked by Somali pirates.
There's been a lot of murder out at sea. Piracy is like lottery for poor people that are starving, and they're ready to risk their lives.
You're desperate.
Yeah.
Maybe I see you in Saudi Arabia. I should come to Ali because I've been trying for a month to get a boat and I can't find a boat. So Ali, I might need your help.
I wasn't getting a visa to walk through Eritrea. We'd been waiting on a visa for 4 months. It wasn't coming through. I'm a 56-year-old man, and I don't have forever to accomplish this. It's unfortunate because some of these countries are just magnificent in terms of cultural resources, and they're important pieces of the puzzle of human migration. Political borders have been the biggest obstacle, there's no question about it. I've had to do what our ancestors did when they hit a glacier. They had to walk around it. We've always been grasping for something beyond our reach. The journey itself makes us human.
I didn't have to travel only to mountaintops. The questions that we are asking, understanding ourselves, understanding the history of the universe, have become so difficult to answer that we require massive experiments all being done in some very extreme locations because of the sensitivity that you need to even begin answering these questions.
Dark matter may be the scaffolding of the universe. We don't see it, but it's there. It's what draws visible matter into place. But there's much more of it than there is of the visible matter. It represents 85% of the matter in the universe, we believe. And we don't know what it is.
Dark matter will pass right through an atom. What are you going to build that's going to actually capture one of these particles? You need about half a mile of rock or more to shield you from all the particle noise that would create the same signal on the surface. Even after you've gone half a mile underground, humans are radioactive enough that if you stand near one of these detectors, it will go off as if a dark matter particle had hit your detectors. We know lead can shield us from radioactivity, but new lead itself is radioactive. What these physicists did is they found some lead that had been salvaged from a ship that had sunk off the coast of France in the 18th century. These are the kind of lens that they've gone to build a detector that is completely shielded so that it can detect this very, very tiny signal of a dark matter particle. Most theories suggest that at very, very small scales, the structure of space-time is not completely smooth. It might be frothy. How would you find such a structure? Theory tells us that neutrinos are particles that will interact with the structure of space-time. Some of the earlier neutrino detectors were essentially large tanks of water that were lined with photomultiplier tubes put inside mines, looking for the flash of blue light that happens when a neutrino hits a water molecule. And in order to have any chance of detecting them, you need larger and larger volumes of water. The Russians came up with a really ingenious way of addressing this problem. Lake Baikal has 20% of the world's unfrozen freshwater. It's tucked away in a remote corner of Siberia, deep enough to submerge 3 Empire State Buildings and not see a trace of them. So they wait for the lake to completely freeze over. When the ice is about a meter thick all across, they use that ice as a platform, send in divers, and use the lake itself as a detector. They have about 2 months in which they can do this work before the ice starts cracking and it becomes dangerous to be on the ice. Even to get to the experiment, you have to ride over this ice for about 40 kilometers, scouting for zones of good ice on which they can drive. One of the challenges of doing neutrino physics in a lake is that for every neutrino, there are about 1 billion cosmic ray muons that also hit the water, also creating the same kind of blue light. So one solution is to go deep down so that you can use the water as a shield against the cosmic ray muons. But even at the depth of about 1 kilometer, the cosmic ray muons will outnumber by 1,000 to 1. So the neutrino physicists have come out with a very ingenious solution. It so happens that cosmic ray muons cannot go through rock, but neutrinos can. So imagine now that you're looking at neutrinos that are coming from the other side of the Earth and hitting the bottom of Lake Baikal. So you're essentially using the entire planet as a shield against the noisy cosmic ray muons, and you're creating a zone of silence just at the bottom of Lake Baikal.
out in the desert, there was just no noise. It was just my world of silence. I have no clue why I do these things. Losing my eyesight, I saw better within than I ever saw before. The real world was blurred, so I went with seeing from within inside. And that enabled me to run for phenomenal distances. 1 foot in front of another, mile after mile. During the night, I had to keep moving. I kept focused on the white line that was on the road. And that white line always kept me focused as to where I'm going until that moon started to climb over the peak.
I arrived in Saudi Arabia on a Syrian cargo ship that was carrying 9,000 sheep and 800 camels from Africa. To be able to walk through this part of the world that has been so closed off for centuries, actually, was pretty remarkable.
What do you think makes people so restless? You know, my project is about discovery. It's about humankind's natural impulse to always look over the next mountain, cross the Bab el-Mandeb. What's your philosophy or theory about why we're that way?
I think it's a mankind nature. And I think our Bab el-Mandeb now is out of space.
We have walked 2 days out of the vast port city of Jeddah. Ahead, the long, austere salt plains of the Hejaz coast, a white ramp that leads 700 miles north to Jordan, a strip of Saudi Arabia not traversed by an outside traveler on foot since the days of Lawrence of Arabia. The photos I captured of the Arabian Hajj trail system may be the first ever taken of those particular stretches of the network. At least since cars began bumping down old caravan trails in the early 1940s. And already we're lost. Modern-day Saudi Arabia has lost so much memory beneath sleek highways, parking lots, hotels, malls. Saudi Arabia is a more urbanized society than the United States today. Because they've had oil wealth, they live in these westernized bubbles. Cars with rolled-up windows. And herein lies a paradox. As our species becomes more successful, more populous, we fracture the world into ever tighter panoramas, into countries, provinces, neighborhoods, houses, private space. In this way, a proportionally larger share of the planet becomes alien, exotic, threatening, unknown.
In a sense, the car has become a prosthetic for a world that is no longer human in scale. On foot, I have reconnected with fellow human beings in ways I could never conceive as a reporter crisscrossing maps by jet and car. Out walking, I constantly meet people.
That's good.
I cannot ignore them or drive by them. I chat with strangers 5, 10, 20 times a day. People unlike me who carry very different ideas and universes inside of their heads. It's the opposite of the echo chambers of the internet. It's the difference between a tweet that's exchanged at the speed of electrons and a heart-to-heart that can change your life. I'm not just talking about walking across the world. I'm listening my way across it. In this way, walking builds a home everywhere. Scientists who have strapped GPS devices to the world's last hunter-gatherers report that the typical male forager walks about 7 miles a day, like walking annually from New York to Los Angeles. This is roughly the distance I'm covering year to year. It's normal. It's sitting down that's actually insane. We do way too much of it. It makes us sick with depression, addiction, and attention deficit disorders. All motorized societies classify walkers as suspicious beings. I personally have encountered hundreds cast up everywhere like flotsam, escapees from the wrath of nationalist mobs in the cities. They put me up in their grubby tents. More than half were women and children. I'm in a valley called Wadi Natuf. The first human beings to ever stop walking took up residence in a cave here 10,000 to 13,000 years ago. They concocted a world-changing idea, home. No longer was all movement worship. Meaning, not to mention God, began to assume a fixed address. A Czech novelist, Milan Kundera, once wrote, "The struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting." As we set out on this project, the lives of 2.3 billion people, a third of the world's population, are potentially linked through electronic devices. By the time this walk ends in Tierra del Fuego, that global connectivity may very well be complete. Wireless messages are soaring above us, crisscrossing the world at the speed of light. What impressions will they leave behind that resonate with human beings 50,000 years from now? Will they be beautiful, or even worth a glance? I find ancient petroglyphs scattered throughout the landscape. I try to capture their facsimile with a digital camera, a tool whose only record, electronic zeros and ones, won't last even 20 years, much less 20 centuries. We are the ghosts.
So the oldest living thing that we know of is some bacteria living in the Siberian permafrost, doing DNA repair below freezing, meaning that it's not dormant. It's been living and growing there below freezing for 500,000 years. So I made images of the bacteria under the microscope, and it turns out no one had done that before. There are stromatolite fossils all over the world. The stromatolites date back to 3.5 billion years ago. The stromatolites actually did the job of oxygenating our atmosphere. It took 900 million years. So I like to say, the next time you take a breath, thank a stromatolite. The oldest colony is living in Western Australia. Astrobiologists have studied this idea of bacteria potentially having piggybacked in on a meteorite and landed on Earth somewhere. And it turns out there's a meteor impact site right over the crest of the beach where I photographed the stromatolites. So I'm not saying that's where life on Earth began, but it's certainly really fun to try to start to puzzle that out. I had an opportunity to visit CERN where fascinating questions that would answer so many things for us are being explored. What is the nature of the universe? Can we replicate the moments after the Big Bang? What happened in the depths of time that we wouldn't normally have any relationship to otherwise?
The Large Hadron Collider is where you get a sense of how extreme these detectors are. When you actually enter the caverns that house the world's biggest machine, the coldest thing in the universe, colder than outer space.
At CERN, we built a machine that's the size of a city, recreating the kind of high-energy environment that has not existed in the universe since a fraction of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang.
What we're looking for is the genetic code in the universe. This is a device with 80 million channels of electronics.
It uses 1 full year of the planet's production of helium to run. Magnets had to be developed 250,000 times the strength of the Earth's magnetic field.
It's like a racetrack spread out over 27 kilometers, and you have particles that are moving close to the speed of light. They're going around 11,000 times per second.
And they collide in a very small space, finer than a human hair. The equivalent to firing knitting needles from Europe and from America and having them collide head-on midway over the Atlantic.
If you put enough energy into a collision, you can create particles out of nothing.
We seem to need 17 particle types to build the universe. I was elected the leader of the experiment to search for the Higgs. It's been called the God particle because we require atoms. Atoms are what builds the structure of everything we have, including ourselves. And without the Higgs, there'd be no atoms.
We're producing 200 million collisions a second. This is huge, and this is a worldwide enterprise to pick out the interesting one.
Down the hallway from me, Tim Berners-Lee developed the World Wide Web for us to coordinate all this information. We built the LHC as a collaboration of 178 institutes worldwide, 40 countries.
And that's something our civilization may have been known for as one of the key things we've done. We keep extending into new regions beyond our imagination. Extra dimensions, the fabric of space-time, the production of black holes. And if there's no more accelerators built, because the next ones would need magnets the size of the galaxy, it often occurs to me that the work we're doing now may have to stand for millennia. Who else is going to look back to 1/1,000,000,000 of a second after the Big Bang?
Believe it or not, I ended up going into physics through art. And that brought me back into these questions I've been asking in the background of my life. Where do we come from? What is this place we're in? What's driving the universe to be as it is? What we're trying to understand is a timeless thing.
A 100,000 years ago, pigments were being made for the purposes of art. 40,000 years or so ago, we have the oldest surviving artwork, and it's this red dot painting. That artwork, it turns out, was made by a Neanderthal artist. To me, what that says is art was important to the human experience even before we were fully human.
My mother was a self-taught painter of this region. Because of the remoteness of this area, there was virtually impossible television reception. So if I wasn't outdoors riding on my horse, I was drawing. As I matured more with my work, eventually the actual depiction of the landscape began to fall away. The process of drawing for me is really about accessing the edge of memory. Some sort of pre-conscious or unconscious knowledge that we all share, that if we can get out of our own way, we could access this place and access what we know. And it's this kind of deep memory that I find is the inexhaustible reason why I keep working. And this is a kind of memory that I believe has to exist in us from the tiniest level of being of who we are and what we have evolved from. And that's why stillness is so important, that deep, deep recessed knowledge can surface. Something is being accessed that I can't know consciously, and yet it's there. If I don't dictate ahead of time what the drawing is to be. I do feel that the grasses have memory, that the soil has memory, the air has memory. The memory of water. When you think about the DNA we carry and the heredity that we carry, why can't we have cellular memory? That reverberation is going all the way through.
Шаманы говорят, что все имеет голос дух. Любое, все, что окружает вокруг нас, они имеют голос дух. Шаманы говорят голос дух, а наука сказала бы вибрации. Все есть вибрации. Они слышат это голос. То есть не только слышат, они воспринимают. Он сначала тоже слушает, как река бежит. Он на реку настраивается и потом исполняет. Жалтыр хөгжим ойнап жаран тывалар. Жарыстың тыва хөгжимini оқшанда көрікшілерге да әвес. Қолдың ана поду, пойдустан көні пойдустың чаражындан, пойдустың ташменден жап атлақсап, көмелісіп, сейшін жаларлап көмеліп жаран. Бір туғардың нақпаштың олыстарының ассоциации с космическими звуками какими-то. Их уносят в космос. Тюркоязычный по Казахстанға да, Якутскага да, Кыргызстанға да олыстарының тезі болса. Вот я слушаю тувинскую музыку, и мне кажется, что я начинаю вспоминать что-то очень знакомое и давно забытое. Но что это именно такое, я не могу вспомнить. Это какая-то историческая генетическая память начинает пробуждаться. Мне так кажется.
The universe's first light has in it the imprint of primordial sound waves. They essentially set the universe ringing with a fundamental frequency and a whole bunch of harmonics. And the imprint of the primordial sound waves can now be seen in the way galaxies and clusters of galaxies are structured. The cosmic microwave background.
So this is the cosmic microwave background, which is the earliest light in the universe. So 380,000 years after the Big Bang, this radiation was imprinted on the sky. And before that, there was actually no light. I realized my subjects were getting beyond geologic time and into cosmic time. And so as I was starting to wrap up the oldest living things, I knew that deep time and deep space were going to be my next subjects. The cosmic microwave mandala combines a traditional Tibetan Buddhist sand mandala with an image of the cosmic microwave background. Both are trying to make sense of our place in the universe.
In Tibetan Buddhism, there are a lot of correlations between the human body and the cosmos.
You try, with the help of the mandala, to realize this interconnectedness. It's also a depiction of an inner cosmology. You carry the cosmos within you.
The Zen mandala is a 2,600 years old design. It took me over 25, 30 years practice. I've been doing this, fighting for my country. I'm not carrying any weapons in my hand. I'm simply carrying a beautiful art for welfare of all sentient beings.
When I first saw this beautiful mountain with the sun breaking over behind me and capturing the peak, I said, okay, sweetie, I see you. I've trained a long time to get here, but it's still a long way to go. I've got a lot of miles, a lot of footsteps. It's a little over 14,500 feet. As I was approaching the last mile on the climb, I just savored every step. It was almost a fantasy, and I was afraid to let go of it. That was cumulatively about a 200-mile run, 84 hours. I'm awake for over 4 days. I thought about all these things, and when I got to the top, I was just crying. I couldn't believe it. I started crying. And I looked back towards Badwater. I knew that I had gone up that desert by myself as far as I could see. But I didn't realize my adventure was just starting. I ran probably about 50 miles the next day. There were all kinds of people wanted me, television, radio, and I didn't want to talk to anybody. It was a personal thing. My wife, Betty, was preparing for a dinner party, and I said, well, I'm going to go body surfing. Next thing I knew, I was sucked into the first of a series of rogue waves. Eventually it was washed ashore, and they were able to find me, and at that point I was totally paralyzed. It severed half my spinal cord. I could visualize my wife preparing for a dinner party that would never take place. Still with me. The therapist put me in a wheelchair. I said, I'm going to walk again. And she says, you'll be lucky if you walk at all, even with a walker. I couldn't make anything go on my stationary bicycle. I couldn't hold anything in my hand. But my legs, after repetitive efforts, I was able to function, but there's little or no strength. And it was at that point I realized that I've come a long way. It was 3 days short of 1 year earlier that I was totally paralyzed. I said, put me on my stationary bicycle. And I remember that I prayed, and I rode that bike for 10 miles. In January of 1978, I ran the Paul Mazon Marathon, 26 and a quarter miles. There was a fire station just before the start of each loop. And I went in, I told the guys, I've lost all my fine motors. If I fell, you'd have to pick me up. I couldn't get up. And I could have bowel movement. I have no control. I like to leave clean clothes, shoes, and everything, and use your shower that you use for the trucks to clean up before I start again. And they said, no problem. I just took off everything, messy as it was, right in the shower. When I came back, they had cleaned the other stuff, dried it. I put that on. And then they all ran along with me to the finish line. They gave me clean clothes. They gave me dignity. I guess it takes really getting beat up to realize how strong you are. You know, I've lost my external mobility, but the internal mobility expands, just like the universe.
I've walked with many people across the world so far. The African proverb is that if you want to walk quickly or fast, you walk alone, and if you want to walk far, walk together. By walking with a local person, they allow me to see that landscape through their eyes. In Ethiopia, I was walking with one of Ethiopia's finest fossil finders, with a desert guide in Djibouti who was running for parliament on a very strange, clunky kind of 1980s radio phone, marshalling votes as we were walking through the desert. I'm not too surprised to say that he lost. I've walked in Saudi Arabia with Mohammed bin Nunaf, a special forces general in the Saudi army, who was a true life force, a man who was a great raconteur, who was a wealth of Bedouin folk knowledge, who was willing to walk hundreds of kilometers through the Hijaz Desert during some of the hottest part of the year, cheerful, full of off-color jokes. With an abdominal hernia, a part of his gut had actually come out through his abdominal wall. And he refused to tell me. He kept it secret for weeks and actually walked about 250 miles in this condition, quietly wrapping up his abdomen with a cloth in the mornings before I woke up so he could take the pain. And when I finally stopped the walk and medevaced him, the doctor was amazed that he was still alive. And he is my Saudi Arabia. In Turkey, I met a young Kurdish photographer, Murat Yazar, who expressed an interest in walking with me for 9 days. Murat so loved the walk that he ended up walking with me all the way across Turkey for 7 months. And then didn't even stop at the Turkish border, but continued walking through Georgia with me. I stand back from my own project and watch in awe as my walking partners become the driving force, rediscovering their own home on foot. So I partnered with Kazakh wolf hunters, joined by an archaeologist, creating petroglyphs on the landscape across Kazakhstan for Kazakhs separated from their ancestral nomadic ways, as a way of not forgetting. A mounted archer taller than 3 football fields, a stylized camel stretching nearly a quarter-mile from nose to tail, and 2 other gigantic motifs borrowed from local history. When Google Earth updates its satellite imagery of Central Asia, you'll be able to appraise Astafiev's artwork from orbit. A melon seller from far western Uzbekistan decided to join the walk. And he was also a forced migrant, a man who was so poor that he'd been forced dozens of times to go work illegally in Kazakhstan as a construction laborer, and had the scars on his body from Kazakh police beatings to prove it. And Tolik was almost a folkloric figure. His attitude to life was totally unflappable. Whether we were being arrested and detained more than 30 times, whether the donkeys would escape into the Bristlecone Desert, whether our water was stolen and we were without water in the middle of the desert, he was this calm, steady, inspiring person who would have been dismissed as kind of a street-side vendor if you had driven by him in a car. The idea is to gather them all.
I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to find somebody to pay for their air tickets, to gather hundreds of these people to whom the walk belongs, as much to them as to me, in Tierra del Fuego at the finish line, and then have us all walk together for the last day down to the Antarctic Sea.
Because in truth, this isn't only my journey, it's yours too. If you go far back enough in your family tree, some ancestor walked the trails that I'm following. We're all walking together into the 21st century.
Paul's walk comes at a time when our ability to connect has been increasingly replaced by interactions with our screens and our devices. When we have so many reasons to be strangers to one another. I knew that many, many lives would be touched by his walk and that many would be touching him.
To be a walker on a planet conquered by suspicion, the flags, the incessant babble of television. I'm often asked about safety. Israeli soldiers fired rubber bullets at me as I zigzagged through the West Bank. A militia of village guards nearly shot me from behind a tree while walking through Turkey. And to date, the police in 10 countries have detained me 84 times for, well, suspicious walking. Still, as a member of one of the most disempowered minorities in our motorized age, a pedestrian, I can assert with confidence that by and large, our shared planet is not a dangerous place. In the Arab world, I learned to scale human compassion by the pound. Daily invitations to meals and tea had the effect of lightening my rucksack in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the West Bank. And in the Caucasus, the Georgians did Christian charity proud. During my 42-day trek through their mountainous nation, I was kindly invited into private homes every night. In Western Kazakhstan, my cargo horse foundered. A local nomad transported a healthy replacement from his own herd more than 100 miles away. In Uzbekistan, a police state where I was detained 37 times, villagers sometimes did turn me away. "I'm sorry," they'd whisper. "I don't want trouble with the KGB." Often they looked acutely embarrassed, their fear clearly at war with their own thwarted neighborliness. They sent out children with fresh-baked bread as I walked away. All the Abrahamic faiths espouse compassion towards wayfarers. "Love the foreigner as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt," says the book of Leviticus. As I now point my boot tips towards India and China, I'll doubtless find similar resonances in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. When I talk to school kids, which I do pretty frequently, I use these positive interactions to remind them to not be afraid. Because I think in today's day and age, when we're inundated with a tsunami of anxiety-causing news about the other dumped on your head every day, the weird after effect of the information age explosion is a recurrence of tribalism. The walk has provided a through line that is connected not from mountaintop to mountaintop, but from person to person. I'm not walking to somewhere. I would not be sitting here talking to you from southern Pakistan if I didn't get this help of thousands of people, almost all of them strangers, who have no warrant to help me at all. I have to remind people, don't let digital overload strike fear into them a paralyzing fear that would immobilize them from going out into the larger world and exploring places and experiences beyond their immediate horizon. This whole place, this chaotic, heartbreaking, maddening, beautiful, ecstatic place is yours, belongs to you. It's home, all of it. I was born in suburban California, but raised in semi-rural Mexico. Like many children who straddle borders, I learned to pour my loyalty into relationships, not places. I'm making for Tierra del Fuego, the last continental horizon. I'm not walking toward the exotic other. I'm walking toward a better part of myself. These people.